Hello and welcome to another video. So I wanted to rank the books I read in 2022. This was ideal for January or maybe even December, but you know, we are here, and I still want to do it, so let's just get into it. Now, I am a fairly new reader, and I'm a very slow reader. I would say very slow because some people read like crazy. Like I'm looking at some other people's lists and it's like hours long because they've read so many books and it's just a lot. I think I have like 14, maybe 15 books on here. Also, I will get some of the names of the authors wrong probably, but so I apologize in advance. Yeah, so let's start. I have my laptop here. So here are our categories. So the worst one is Oh Gods Why. That's for the books I hated, the books I never want to see again, and yeah. The next one is Read It So You Can Say You've Read It. So it's not a great book, but you should read it probably. The third one is It's Fine. It isn't. I don't have negative feelings about it, but I wasn't like blown away by what I read. The second to last is It's a Classic and It's Good. That's a book that I loved. I should say it doesn't generally just mean, oh, it's a classic. It doesn't have to be a classic to be in this. It's just I think it's kind of as good as a classic book is, and it's good. And the last one is I'm gonna need to reread this. Now, for me, that's like the highest compliment you can get, right? Especially like as a new reader, as someone who's just getting into reading a lot. I did read before, but not nearly as much as I am now. Yeah, so if I'm gonna need to reread this book, that's an amazing book. So yeah, let's start. I don't really have an order here, but let's start with Narnia. So C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's a classic, but I'm gonna need to reread it, and I will reread it because I'm reading them currently in Serbian. I'm now on book 2, and yeah, I just really liked the first one. It is kind of it's not geared to children. It is for children, but I really like it. I mean, there's a part where like Santa Claus shows up and gives them weapons. He gives little kids weapons. That's like amazing, and it is a classic. But I really enjoyed it. Um, what next? Let's get a Serbian one out of the way. So this is called Plašim se by Vanja Nikolic, and it's fine. Vanja Nikolic, this is kind of like a self-help book. It is a self-help book, I believe. And she has a first one called Jebemise, which literally translates to I don't give a fuck, kind of. Um, that one was amazing. That was a great book. This one was kind of okay. It's kind of like a continuation of that, and it's fine. But do you need to read it? No. And unless you know Serbian, you probably can't. I do not think it has an English translation. So yeah, all the other ones are English though. Yeah, what next? Let's do a writing one. The Elements of Style by Strunk and White. I'm gonna put this in Read It So You Can Say You've Read It. If you don't know, they used to call it, I think, the Little White Book or the Little Blue Book. I forget which color it was, but it was basically written by a professor in like the 1920s, and he used it in his class a lot, and everyone kind of referenced it. I believe that's White, and then Strunk updated it. Maybe it was the other way around, but in like the 1950s or 60s, he wrote like a modernized version of that little like book, and it is a little book. I think it has like 50 pages or something, and it's just about writing and about style and a little grammar. Um, it is really old. Even the like updated versions of it, it's really technical, which isn't a bad thing at all. But so, for example, in the book, I believe it's the word disgusting. They talk about how people use it in the wrong manner, but someone that like that how people do like a comment or like someone's notes at the end or in the beginning of the book. Someone used, I think, that word improperly than the book states, and it's because the book is so old. And I have seen versions that are like modern versions of it. That was like in 2008 and stuff. So it just isn't. It's interesting. I believe you can use it still, but you kind of have to accept that some things are old. And it's also written kind of. It's not complicated in its writing, but it kind of assumes a lot from you, especially like if English is not your first language, or if you're just starting out in writing. I don't believe this is a good place to be. I believe you should read it. So you've said you've read it, so because a lot of people talk about it, even in some of these other books that we'll get to on writing, they talk about this book and reference it. But yeah, do you need it? No. Okay, let's do The Little Prince. Oh, I love The Little Prince. I'm gonna need to reread this. I will reread this. Is it better than Narnia? It is. It is definitely better than Narnia. It's an amazing book. It's a classic. I believe half of the world has read it, which is a lot. People might think, oh, the entire world has read it. Probably not, but I definitely believe half of the world has read The Little Prince. And yeah, I even put in the book I'm writing, I put a little reference to The Little Prince, which I really like. And I probably should delete because those kind of meta references are stupid, but I love The Little Prince. It says so much. I believe, it's not a children's book. And Narnia definitely is a children's book. Whereas The Little Prince has such layers to it. Yeah, Narnia does not do that, definitely. I love The Little Prince. Let's move on. Yeah, what's next? Let's do The Eye of the World. I feel like I will definitely reread The Eye of the World at some point. And I think I even liked it more than Narnia. I love The Eye of the World, like in its culmination. It's just really good. It is a classic. It is, a beginning of an epic story. And yeah, I really liked it. I don't, I'm trying to think about reasons why I shouldn't put it here, and I'm not getting anything, which tells me that it should be here. Okay, let's do The Great Hunt as well. Now, The Great Hunt probably would be in the top spot, but because I dislike the ending so much, I'm gonna have to put it in. It's a classic and it's good. But the ending really didn't give me what I needed, and so I'm gonna peg it down. Otherwise, it will be right next to The Eye of the World if the ending was a little different, a little meatier, a little, harder. But yeah, it's still a good rating. It's just I almost want to put it in It's Fine because I dislike the ending so much. But yeah, let's not go that far. What next? Let's do On Writing by Stephen King. On Writing by Stephen King. So I'm gonna put it in It's Fine, and it's better than Plaşımsı. The thing about On Writing, even though a lot of people talk about it and like it, I do believe it is the best-selling craft book, but I could be wrong. It's kind of divided into a memoir and then like writing advice. And I feel like the memoir part it's classic and it's good. And I feel like the writing advice is read it so you can say you've read it. So like when you combine them, it's just fine. It is entertaining, but I feel like, looking at when it's a book about writing, what does it give you? Does it give you ways to do story? Does it give you ways to do grammar and everything regarding, the actual craft part of the craft of writing? Is it about plot? Is it about, all these things? And Stephen King doesn't really do any of those things, but yet does all of them. But it's not, the result isn't something you will remember. and he's not gonna give you good rules. Like sometimes when I read these books, I'm like, oh my god, I never thought of that, and that's a great rule. Like you should never do that. Like I remember, and let's talk about The Anatomy of Prose by Sacha Black. I'm gonna put it in It's Fine, and right above Stephen King. And The Anatomy of Prose, it's also a book about writing, and there she gives you really concise rules, and she says, "Hey, this is the rule at the end of every chapter. This is the rule. Remember it." And I feel like that was really good. I remember specifically the rule about names. So when you're writing, a lot of time you get like, oh, in dialogue, I hate you, Mary, and then, oh, don't be like that, Bianca. And they keep saying each other's names, which is stupid because humans don't talk that way. You almost never use someone's name when you're talking to them. But in dialogue, you feel like as a writer, you should use names because it makes it better. It makes it better, more clear about who is telling that, who the character is talking to. But in many cases, you do not need to do that. Like, especially when we have only two characters talking, they would never use their names. And, these are the kind of rules that The Anatomy of Prose gives you that Stephen King doesn't. But Stephen King is, the memoir part is really entertaining. I really liked learning about him more and just learning about what he thinks about writing. I would say that's the thing. I'll put him above Sacha Black, just because I believe his book is more entertaining than Sacha Black's, but I feel like hers is more useful. But his just philosophy it is entertaining. You just won't get a lot of good advice out of it, like something you can actually use on your book. And also, like, some people don't like that he claims that good writing needs to be like the Pantser version or like the non-planning version. But yeah, that's another discussion that we're not having right now. Let's go to Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Read it so you can say you've read it. I'll put it above The Elements of Style because I feel like The Elements of Style is so specific, and I feel like more people should read Metamorphosis. But overall, I did not like Metamorphosis, and we'll talk about Kafka because there's one more book by him here. But yeah, overall, I did not enjoy Metamorphosis, and I think that if anything you should read by Kafka, it should be Metamorphosis. But besides that, it is not a great book. And it was, he did not, I remember reading somewhere that Franz Kafka did not like the ending of Metamorphosis, and I did not like the ending of Metamorphosis. I agree with Kafka. Okay, next, The Stranger by, I believe the writer's name is Albert Camus. In Serbian, I believe we say Camus, but I think in English it might be different. It's a classic and it's good. I'm gonna put it below The Great Hunt. I didn't love reading this. I didn't love it. And in fact, I remember the ending being very boring to me in a way of kind of, hey, like I understand where you're going with this, but like we know this is fine. But understanding, as time goes on, I kind of understand more and more where that book is coming from. And also at that time, saying the things this book was saying was revolutionary. So, maybe not revolutionary because, I believe like there have been other books that have said what The Stranger has said, but, the Stranger just did it really well. I should also mention that The Stranger is sometimes called The Outsider in like English versions. But in Serbian, it's called like the direct translation of The Stranger. Okay, next, let's do Pride and Prejudice. I loved Pride and Prejudice, and I will reread it. Did I love it more than The Little Prince? I believe I did. I really believe I did. Pride and Prejudice was that book for me that, I lost sleep because of, because I one more chapter, and, it's just the best of Jane Austen. And yeah, everyone loves that book. I don't need to talk about it a lot, but yeah. Save the Cat writes a novel. Okay. Oh Gods, why? Uh, I despised reading this book. This is the only book on this list that I haven't really read because I skipped parts because they were so boring. Like the parts where they analyze other books and they talk about how those books fit into the structure of Save the Cat. It was so boring that I started skipping, especially the books that I haven't read. I was like, okay, 3 pages gone. I personally do not like formulas, and even though in Save the Cat they talk about how this isn't a formula, but it's kind of this universal truth that all good stories have this format, and just it's not true. It's not true. It was this was the Save the Cat writes a novel, but the original Save the Cat was written by a playwriter. Yes, I believe so, and I believe he worked in Hollywood, and you can tell. You can tell that this was written by someone, or this idea was created by someone who needs to make content, who needs this to be less of an art and more of a science, basically. And they don't even do a great job at that. But yeah, I overall do not agree with Save the Cat beats overall. I think they can be fine and they can be used to create stories. I just have an issue with claiming that that is the only way to make a story, which is what they do a lot. And they also lie to you in certain ways in this book. Like they talk about Lord of the Rings and they give examples of Lord of the Rings, but there are parts of Lord of the Rings that definitely don't fit into Save the Cat writes novel, or Save the Cat beats. Like in all the walking, that just isn't a thing. I can also think of so many books that break, like The Stranger breaks this. Half of the books on this list break Save the Cat in some way. And this claim of, hey, this is the only way to write, it is. I feel about it the way a lot of people feel about Stephen King's on writing. Like Stephen King kind of makes it clear that that's the way he thinks you should write, but it's not. He doesn't make claims that throughout all of history every good story has these elements. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think it's true, and it's correct. And so it's kind of a long book. For what it is, it's kind of long. With that said, if you're a writer and you're using Save the Cat, that's perfectly fine. And I don't think you're a worse writer if you use Save the Cat, or if you feel like you need a beat sheet. I feel like you probably are doing a good thing overall, planning ahead. I just think that the way this book formulated things was really boring in certain parts, and the writer, it was written well. I wouldn't say it was badly written. I just didn't like the things the book was saying. Let's do Verity by Colleen Hoover. Verity. Oh, I don't know where to put Verity. I will have my next video will be about Verity, this book. And I don't know where. You know what? It is a classic. I'm gonna put it in. It's a classic and it's good. And here's why. It's not a classic in the sense of a classic book, but I believe it is a classic of Colleen Hoover. Like in 10 years or 15 years, 20 years, when people reference Colleen Hoover, they will think of Verity in the way they think about Sense and Sensibility. Even though it's not the most successful book, it is a good book by this author. And Verity has some very interesting moments, and I will talk about them in my next video. So yeah, check that out. Okay, but let's do Sense and Sensibility. I will put it, it's a classic and it's good. And I'm gonna put it above Verity, above The Stranger. It's not above The Stranger. Because The Stranger, That's Camus', maybe not his most famous work, but I think it is his most famous work. I might be wrong in there, but whereas Jane Austen has better works. And I say works because I think there's multiple of them. Sense and Sensibility, I really found boring the part when they went to London. It just kind of dragged out. This one is sad because her guy married someone else. Then this one is sad because her guy married someone else. Then there's the old guy that likes the young girl, and he's also kind of pathetic. And it is a far cry from like the tension you got in Pride and Prejudice. It is nowhere close with the tension that book brings. So it can drag a little bit, but overall, it is still Jane Austen. It is still funny, very funny in moments, and very like oddly true. Like when she talks about specifically women, I know a lot of those women in my life. The last one is The Trial by Kafka. And even though we seem to have this like nice pyramid going up, we will have to break it because I will have to put it in Oh Gods Why. Is it worse than Save the Cat? Yes. It is a worse written book. But I didn't skip parts. But I didn't skip parts because you couldn't, not because I didn't want to. So I'm conflicted where to put it. It's definitely here, but it's worse than Save the Cat, and here's why. It has so much potential, and that's what makes it a classic, because the idea is great. The idea is amazing. It can be, referenced in so many ways, and put in, so many situations can be explained through the idea of what the trial is. And I think that's why a lot of people like it, and it was turned into a classic. And Kafka himself became famous after he died because of this book and a lot of his work. But it is so unedited. It breaks every writing rule. It tells you it is literally the perfect example of telling instead of showing. The trial is a story about a man prosecuted for a crime that he has no idea he committed, and he doesn't even know what the crime is. So it's this idea of a individual going against a system of oppression and a system that represents, bad things. We almost never see that system. We don't see anything of that system. We are told how that system operates. And then the main character goes to another place, and then he's told how the system operates. And then he goes to a third guy, the lawyer, and he tells him how the system operates. And that's all. That's almost all we get in this book. And the dialogue, Kafka is not good at dialogue. He was really bad in dialogue here. It is really monologues instead of dialogues. You have one character that just talks and talks and talks and talks. And he does this weird thing where every character is like, and you might be thinking, and then he talks. But then you also might be thinking, and then he talks. And every character talks like this way. You cannot tell them apart from their dialogue. It is woefully, is that a word I should use here? I don't know. It is extremely unedited, which makes sense because it was never released by Kafka. It could have been so better. The opening line is iconic. Someone must have been telling lies about Yosef K. But overall, it is just so stupid. It is so stupid. And he does nothing with, like, the female characters are awful. And it's a blatant self-insert. And all the female characters want to fuck him, and doesn't say anything. And that's the stupidest part, because it's such a good premise. And it could have done so many good things. And it didn't say anything in the end. If you like this book, I challenge you, please leave me a comment defending it. And also, in that comment, try and say, what is the point of the trial? Like, what is the message? What is the anything regarding the actual meaning of this book? And try to do that now. Pause this video, try and do it. Have you tried? Okay. Now, let me say what you shouldn't write, what you should delete if you actually wrote out that comment. If you wrote the premise of the story, which is, a man fighting a system, or whatever you think the premise actually is, if it is the premise, that's not the point of the book. That's the premise. Also, if you wrote that the meaning of the book is that there is no meaning, that is the laziest answer, and it might fly in like some college somewhere, but books are supposed to have meaning, and books are supposed to say something, and even lacking meaning could be a meaning in itself, but that's not what the trial does, because it spends so much time trying to figure out what the meaning of itself is, and you just realize that Kafka didn't have an ending for this book that made sense. He didn't have a point. Now, I can ramble about this book for hours. Believe me, I have already done that to my friends. But overall, I just really think this book has no point. It was left unfinished, and you can tell that it was left unfinished. And you can tell that Kafka didn't have a proper ending in mind. And when I say a proper ending, I mean a proper moral of the story, a proper answer to the question posed. And he just, did what he did in the end, and that was it. And I think he realized that it wasn't that good. It didn't say what he wanted to say, I believe. I hope he wanted to say something. Also, the character just doesn't do anything in the entire book. He's just completely just there and has no motivation. But he talks about his motivation constantly, but he doesn't do anything. And what is it about that? If it was about like a stranger-like character, a Mistral-like character, that he doesn't care that he's on trial, and they actually try to tell him why he's on trial, and he doesn't want to hear it because he doesn't care. That could be a story, that could have meaning, like, oh, life's pointless or whatever. But that doesn't happen here. Yeah. I really disliked reading this book. This was horrible, and let's move on. Yeah, let's look at all of this. Let's rearrange something if we need to. I believe that The Great Hunt isn't this good. I believe The Great Hunt, is it worse than Sense and Sensibility? It's strange because Sense and Sensibility was weak in its middle, and The Great Hunt was weak in its ending. But Sensibility wasn't strong in the ending. It was just okay. It was just, the ending happened and it was like, okay. So yeah, I think I can put it here. Is Verity stronger than any of these books? I don't think so. Yeah, I believe this is it. This is my ranking of all the books I read in 2022. I'm hoping to have an even bigger 2023, even more books to rank at the end of the year. Hopefully that video will be made at the end of the year and not 2 months after the new year. But, what did you think of these books? What is your ranking of them, if you've read all of them? And also, do you have your own list? Leave it in the comments, and if there are any really good recommendations. Yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.